Hey there, everybody. Parks Ousley here with Inven Global. This is Esports Weekly, episode 2. I'm joined today by Nick Geracie, joining from last week as well. Thank you so much for coming back. And Chris Cuevo, someone who freelances with us a lot. And we're very happy to have you on here, kind of expanding your content with us. So welcome, both of you. I hope you had a great week. Chris, I asked Nick last week, so I'm going to go ahead and ask all of my guests because it's pretty relevant info, but have you done anything this coronavirus? Have you picked up any hobbies? Have you learned any new languages or anything?
Yeah, I've picked up some weight for one.
Oh no.
I've gained like 15 pounds probably from staying at home. But other than that, I've been trying to learn Korean
Ah,
because, we have all this time now, so might as well learn something new. And I've been
Right on.
streaming a lot more lately.
oh wow. What are you streaming?
Just a variety of games. I'm playing Sekiro right now and trying
Oh
to
my
get through
gosh.
Guardian Ape, if anyone knows what that boss is.
I don't know that boss. I've played probably 15, 20 hours of that game, and all of them were difficult and terrible, and I have since put it down. Um, but best of luck to you. Nick, I know you
Thank
said you were trying to cook more. Have you made anything fun in the last week?
Yeah, no, wait, I don't
Maybe.
know. I feel like I tried to make some like I tried to do something like pork belly, and like the pork turned out like good, but like I didn't like get the sauce right, so I just ended up eating like pork as pork chops basically. So it was
Uh,
fine. But I have a new router, and my internet is much more stable, so I'm actually able to play games that aren't called Stardew Valley. So I've that came on Monday, yesterday actually, I guess. So or what's today even? I don't even know what day it is, man. But
it's it's Tuesday.
is
For
it
all of you
Tuesday? Wow.
viewers, it's Wednesday. For Nick, it's Tuesday. It came in yesterday. We're all good. I'm
Right
glad.
on, right on. Well, yeah, so that's
I'm
what I've been doing.
I'm glad you got the new router. Get to play some online games, which are, maybe a little bit more closer to our taste than Stardew Valley. Not knocking that game though at all. I want to recap last week before we get started. Just if you didn't watch the episode last week, we talked a lot about the coronavirus and the effects that it had on esports, both on the business side as well as the player side, the fan side, that type of thing. What are the long term implications around it? What does it mean for sponsors? We talked about a lot of that. So check that out. We talked about, is this an asterisk season? How are we going to look back on this in the long run? What does it mean for Cloud9? What does it mean for some of the other orgs like Team Liquid? They didn't perform so well. So go watch that if you're interested in any of that. We also talked about the launch of VALORANT, which I think we're actually going to talk a little bit more on today. But will it live up to the hype that it's had so far? All of those things. So go check out last week's episode if you're interested in any of that. Today, though, we're going to talk about Valorant a little bit more, but specifically how it's impacting Overwatch and the Overwatch League, and then a bunch of other problems that Overwatch League is having currently. So, Chris, I brought you on specifically for this. You are an Overwatch expert, if I've ever seen one. You know the players super well, and I'm really curious about that. I think opening off the Overwatch League discussion, the biggest thing for me, and maybe it was the Titans' departure, but before that was Sinatra's exit. The MVP last season left Overwatch League to play Valorant, which doesn't even have, it's still in closed beta, doesn't even have an esports scene at all yet. So, what is your thought on that specifically?
It was a surprising move for one to see Sinatra, the current MVP and probably the best player right now in Overwatch, just jump ship to Valorant. But I totally get it from his standpoint. He wasn't being played much at all this season, just due to the current meta. So his like main heroes are probably like Doomfist and Zarya, which are not meta at the moment. And just DPS as a whole, it's kind of a little like it's not broad as like even the other roles in the game currently. So you're either stuck with Mei, Reaper, or or you can like nowadays a lot of players are using Echo, which I've seen Sinatra play in his stream, and he's really good at it, to be honest.
Of
Um,
course he is.
yeah, of course, right? And Farah, which he's okay with, but just, like he's not the best. So, so moving to Valorant, like, and like I guess he's craving that more DPS, more aim, like aim scan type of play that Overwatch is missing. It's kind of like it's kind of like eating that, like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If that's who he is as a player and he feels like it fits his identity more, it would make sense for him to jump over. But it's like the timing of it is so weird. The fact that he was MVP and the fact that there's not even a promise of a future. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he got a huge offer and it makes a lot more sense than we realize. But that was the big confusing thing for me. And then there are also a bunch of other players dropping out. Some of them switching to Valorant. Some of them just not necessarily having a defined future, at least not one that they've said publicly yet. What is your thought on the future of Overwatch League with so many players leaving?
I think a lot of DPS players specifically are looking elsewhere for a career outside of Overwatch League now. I think it's really due to the meta. A lot of like I'm a DPS main myself, and I love playing hit scan heroes. So it's really hard to play that in this current meta. And when I played Valorant, it just kind of got that itch. It relieves that itch for me to play like a hit scan type. And I think that's the same way for a lot of DPS players currently in Overwatch League that can't play Widow, can't play Soldier, McCree, those type of heroes. So you'll see a lot of those type of players just move on and just say something that they're tired of the game. They lost passion, like Sinatra, Corey, and Stratus leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I've noticed it's been mostly DP. I mean, yeah, Sinatra's the big one, but like it's been mostly DPS players moving on to new parts of their career, their lives, right? And we, Chris, you covered Overwatch League for the entirety of 2019, and you saw how with the GOATS meta, DPS was kind of prioritized less, and then we had the 222 lock, which was supposed to bring back DPS. But now it sounds to me like even if there's a different cause, like DPS players still aren't able to scratch that mechanical itch. Is it because of the hero pools? Like what has happened? Because I feel like in stage 4 of last season, that's what they were trying to cut. This is what they were somewhat trying to avoid, right? They were trying to have that individual skill expression back, in addition to the complex team play that is required to play GOATs professionally, etc.
I do think they're trying to bring back skill-based like DPS heroes, but they're not really seeing it just because May's really good at the moment, even though she got nerfed. I think she still has a role in this meta. And Reaper, who like, if he's not banned, he's gonna get played. Like, there's no way you can't play Reaper. But nowadays, Echo is starting to creep in. So we're starting to see more of that, and then Widowmaker. It depends on the situation, of course. But it's nowadays like Echo is trending a lot just because of how her build is, her kit. It's hard to like play on the other heroes besides those, I think.
Okay.
So my big question here, if it's all these DPS players leaving, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. However, as Nick alluded to, we had GOATs before where there were no DPS heroes at all. Now we have 2 every game. We have to. By definition, there's the 2-2-2 luck. And so is it because it's just been so long since they felt like they could play the game they wanted to? Like, but and why now would you drop? Why not drop earlier when it was GOATs? Why not say, okay, well, 2-2-2 isn't perfect, the hero pool isn't perfect, but they're making changes. and maybe it will get back to hit scan. What if they make, some patch changes next week and all of a sudden it's Sinatra's meta again, but he already decided to leave? I feel like it's a great I don't know, a great part of why they're leaving, but I don't think it answers everything. What is, I know you know these players personally, way better than I do, for sure, but I think better than most journalists probably. Is there, like, have you felt anything from them? Like, were you expecting all of this to happen?
I really wasn't expecting all of this to happen, like especially from Sinatra and Corey. They've come off like the World Cup, for instance.
Yeah, those are the two starting DPS players for US. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah, right. And like they've come off like an outstanding performance. I mean, Sinatra getting MVP and World Cup too, and then the whole crowd at BlizzCon chanting Corey's name. Like, I did not think that these two players would just up and leave, to be honest. Like, I think they would have waited it out, but I just thought like maybe they were hopeful that the meta would change, but then it wasn't for the longest time. So they've just completely burned out. Even with hero pools, like, it's not a guarantee that they could adapt to it, or like the team can play around their skills. I think it's just a lot of factors going in their head that eventually just up and left. Like they've just burned out.
Yeah. So maybe some change fatigue there as well. If they're fixing problems, but maybe creating new ones, and then, well, we just got used to the old problems. Now we have to get used to new problems. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think the future is then? And Nick, I want to get your take as well, as someone who's so well versed in esports. I don't really know what the future is for Overwatch League, or how they can take better steps in the future to prevent some of this.
I'm going to put Chris on the spot and make him go first, since he's the resident expert for Overwatch League here.
It's totally fair.
Chris, you can go ahead.
All right. I think the first step is just like the Overwatch League needs to figure out like a structured thing that they need to go by, a structured plan to go by, and just run with it. Because it feels like every week they're changing things on the go, and I think that's just like having players, coaches, and just they're just good. They're just saying like what's going on. Like we just heard of these changes last minute. Like, we want something more structured, and I think it's good for the casual audience to see like something new, like hero pools come out, because it gives them like a new meta each week, and it doesn't get stale like GOATS has last year. But for players, coaches, and just people involved in Overwatch League, they have a right to complain. Like, I think just the structure, like a structured plan for one would be like a plan that the league needs to like talk about and just run with. And two, actually, I don't know what two would be, but that would be my main thing.
So maybe just having players and coaches be able to have more involvement in the decision makings of the changes that they're trying to make.
Yeah, like if let's say like the Overwatch team does, this is just their plan to have hero pools and whatever 2-2-2 forever. I think players, teams, management, and Overwatch League officials need to come together and just discuss things to make sure like everyone's on the same page, and it just feels like a disconnect from league officials to the teams in the Overwatch League right now.
Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually gonna kind of piggyback on that. More, I mean, great points, Chris. More so, just the impact I think that what had of after the 2-2 lock, there was people were really happy about that. We saw, I mean, this is when we saw Corey come to power, right? Corey was some random rookie nobody, and then he got to play DPS champions, and Washington Justice had a 6-1 stage 4. They were unbelievable. And then he went and started in the Overwatch World Cup next to Sinatra. He's a great player, right? We wouldn't have known that. People loved that, even if the 2-2 luck was kind of I'm inherently against that. I come from League of Legends where we have 1 million characters, and there's so many different ways we can build compositions in the draft. So like to see players limited in a 29, 28, however many heroes are in the game, pool, it was frustrating, but what it did do was bring back the skill expression. I think people were hoping from both, and by people I mean the audience, but also like players and coaches, that if they're going to be heroes banned every week, we should be seeing some more variety in the competitions being played. But what we're actually seeing is just like a new tier 1 emerging. Like Chris said, we're only seeing the same 2, sometimes 3 now, same DPS champions. I mean, for all intents and purposes, for those to see people shoot some stuff, that's the same problem as GOATs, right? So I do think that there's a viewership aspect of that. Yeah, we're seeing more heroes, but are we seeing differentiation in the actual game, or are we just doing differentiation for the sake of it?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm less helpful than Chris because I don't necessarily have a solution. But as someone who's never been a huge fan of hero pools, I used to see, even when I haven't been a fan, that I used to see like, oh, this could bring variety to the league. It has not in the way that I think they wanted it to where we're not seeing those, in season 1, the Tracer, the Genji, the Widowmaker, and that doesn't mean there isn't room for other heroes too, but there's a clear like ceiling in Overwatch that simply mechanically isn't being hit anymore, or crucially doesn't need to be for the highest level of team play to be viable. And again, it's like, I love the strategy behind chess. I love chess, but I know that, chess isn't going to get Overwatch League viewership on Twitch. And so I think that there needs to be more of a balance to like the excitement of the game. The game is so fast paced and so moving that like, I think we need to be able to see more skill expression, and whatever things that they've introduced haven't really fixed that. And that's also caused a massive disconnect between the player base and the Overwatch League that is only becoming more and more exacerbated as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they need to have what they try to do with hero pools, like come at it with the same reasons for doing it, all of that, but it might be time to either do away with the ban pools or change how they function or something, because I don't think it's addressing the root of the problem. And if your solution doesn't solve the problem, that's just an adjustment. That's a side grade, right? So, and I think that's backed up by all these retirements. So I want to see, yes, dive meta in season 1 was stale. I will admit that, but it was exciting. So as much as a band-aid fix that would be, at least if there's going to be the same heroes played every single game, at least it was more interesting than this. So it's like if you can't balance the game, I don't know, maybe you return it to its roots and go for more of that dive center style, make massive changes. I honestly don't know what the answer is at this point. And I think, like Chris said, the thing that's concerning to me is how it seems to be like these adjustments are not being made like in a very like first fashion where it's on the same page. Players feel kind of moved around. Coaches are talking about how weird it is to adapt to all of this. And I don't know enough about the inner workings, but I have to imagine there has to be something that at the very least, like Chris said, gets the league and the teams and players on the same page. And I think that would definitely lessen, I think, the exodus we're seeing. I mean, people are going to leave to Valorant, but I think there's a consensus that people think like, oh, no one wants to play Overwatch anymore. It's like, no, I think that pros will still play Overwatch if they enjoy still playing Overwatch. They're getting paid a decent amount of money for it. It's their professional career. People like to watch them play. Like, if someone's leaving, yes, that Valorant is an opportunity, but I think people who are Overwatch players, if they're professionals, they've enjoyed the game before, like they don't want to leave if they don't have to, I don't think.
Yeah.
But that's also, the future is so unclear, and a lot of that I think is there's a, like Chris said, a lack of transparency. Forget about us, the press, the fans. It's like it seems like the league and the teams are on different pages right now, and that just simply can't happen.
Yeah, a lot of good points there. I want to talk about one other thing before we leave our Overwatch conversation. I think it'd be unfair to not mention the. You're talking about the Mass Exodus. Oof, English is tough. Of Titans. The fact that they dropped an entire roster right in the middle of the season, and we didn't see an immediate answer. They have, of course, since picked up more players. But I think that's probably still a developing story, and there's probably a lot more there. But what happened? Why... They were great. There's a whole story behind these players, and it was very exciting. There was so much life around that narrative, and it's something that could have gone on for a long time. And I think that was, potentially even bigger than the Sinatra leaving, but kind of for a similar reason. They were just on this giant upswing, and with zero like knowledge from anyone else. They just poof, they're gone. So Chris, what is your kind of thought about that? I know it's still pretty fresh, but what are you thinking?
I think it's sad for the team to disband for one. They've had a long history dating back just to Apex and Overwatch contenders where they just dominated, and just seeing the Vancouver Titans management just say bye and just leaving them in the dark and not having for them the opportunity to talk to the other teams to see if they can just do a trade or something. It just sucks just to see these players not play in the Overwatch League right now. But I do think we'll see them back in some sort of fashion. I don't know if it'll be this season, but I hope they get signed on, because these players are just so good to just be free agents right now, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have, like you said, like the legacy runaway organization that was essentially ported in, and then when they had the best regular season ever. In our small amount of time, they have the highest winning percentage in regular season games, and then yes, they lost in the finals, but that's still an incredible inaugural season. And then they added Ryu Jae-hong and Fissure. These are like two best in class legacy players, right? Like it would be like one thing, I guess, if it's like, oh, those players didn't work out, like split those, that would be fiasco enough. But the fact that the entire team has essentially been stripped, right, tells me that it's less about I'm sure that Fissure's been talked about as someone who's maybe tougher to work with. Ryu Jae-hong has a wealth of experience, but also may not be the most flexible player. He's been on Dynasty / Lunatic High his whole career, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't like those two guys leaving and that not working out, or those two guys joining and the team, suddenly does worse. Like the whole roster left. And if you look at these players' tweets, it's not LFT, it's not like shade at former teammates. I'm so glad that I'm free. And that really, really that's concerning, right? Because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but what we do know is that when they were Runaway before before they became part of the Titans in the Overwatch League, was like the most well-run, this several times over, this Korean Apex Legends Tier 2 organization made teams that could compete with the best Overwatch League teams. There was that exhibition match with Runaway versus Team South Korea. I think it was last year, right? Or 2018 or something like that. And so I don't think that then, and again, I'm glad you brought this up first, because this doesn't have to do with VALORANT at all. This is I just think a total failure in management, at least from the outside looking in. I'm not privy to any inside information, but what I do know is that these were some incredible players with a ton of legacy. And then we randomly got word that the head coach, I think Pajian and Janu were leaving, and then silence, and then suddenly the whole team's gone and they've picked up second win people. So if nothing else, without even knowing what's going on, you can't say this couldn't have been handled better. It's simply inexcusable in that regard, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree. I hope that we find out more clarity on that situation, and just I hope that Overwatch League officials and maybe the devs and whoever else can come up with some sort of solutions to stem the bleeding and patch things up.
Also, one thing really quick, I do think I've just seen this, and I want to say yes, the second win players are not going to be anywhere near as good as the Titans that we know, but they're getting their chance in Overwatch League, and if you're a Titans fan who's upset about what's going on, I hear you, I respect you, understand you. Not the new players' fault. No need to flame them for not being those people. No. You know what I mean? And I get that that's jarring. This is basically a skeleton org now, as far as people who were fans of them before, right? That's tough. But it's definitely if anything, I'm glad you said first, Christian. I'm sad for the players, because that's really that's what this comes down to for me at the end of the day. I don't know how many of these guys will return to Overwatch or play any esport ever again, but we lost some incredible, some of the top talent in every position. I mean, so many good players, right? So I hope for them, whatever they do makes them happy. But this is undeniably a huge loss for the Overwatch League that really I wish had been handled better.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. We do need to switch over. We've run out of Overwatch League time. But
so we're retiring from the Overwatch conversation.
Yep, that's it. Overwatch is done. I'm done with it.
Right.
I'm free from Overwatch League. It is not my specialty, so I appreciate the two of you. And now we will slide into something I know a little bit more about. We're going to talk about League of Legends a little, specifically TSM. And TSM is involved in a bunch of other esports, but the issues that have come up this week are League of Legends related. What we are not going to do is the exact same video that everybody else has done. If you want to hear about all of the problems and all the flame and all of the rage, there are so many videos on YouTube right now from every content creator and journalist and whoever else in the scene talking about the Doublelift and Lena conflict of interest and how that situation is unfolding. For those of you who are a little bit unaware about all of what's going on, I encourage you to watch those videos, but also we're going to explain some of the timeline and the current issues that are being faced and what kind of needs to happen from here going forward. So our discussion is mainly going to be focused on the future. Similar with Overwatch, that one, we talked a little bit more about it as well. But I want to see, what are the next steps? So first, Nick, you kind of spearheaded an article, an Inven Global article, discussing what's going on with TSM. Can you run us through that really quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give you credit, you helped me put this together, so I appreciate that. But
Fair.
I'm just going to try to go through in a very basic, just not take up too much time but basically what's been going on at TSM. If you look kind of at this timeline, April 21st, they're trying to sign. They want to acquire Doublelift. It was first reported by ESPN Esports as Jacob Wolf. Eventually confirmed, but that they're because of Doublelift being in a personal relationship with Lena, the president of TSM. Their LCS conducted an investigation regarding conflict of interest. As of April 26th, nothing. There was no conflict of interest found by the LCS. Trades approved. Everything's standard there. Cody, who was starting in the AD carry position for TSM this spring. As of May 11th, his transfer to Misfits, which is confirmed. He's back in Europe. I think that, in my opinion, I think that Misfits is a good spot for him. And Misfits even publicly said, hey, TSM, thanks for making this a smooth transfer. All is well. A couple hours later, though, Doublelift is streaming, and Lena is able to be heard in the background saying, it's not up to me. Like, for example, no one wants to pick up Dardoch. That's not my fault. And that kind of implies that not only are TSM trying to shop Dardoch around, but that this was just, leaked on a major player's stream, a teammate of Dardoch's at this current time, right? Technically speaking. And so that's kind of where the community backlash has come from, primarily what happened in the last day or so. Because there's a lot of different, potential consequences and ramifications of that kind of thing happening. And that's kind of why, the entire LCS offseason has sort of been set ablaze with the situation. Like you said, so much content coming out and addressing all these issues in a very, very multifaceted situation that we have here in this offseason developing.
Mm-hmm. And so I think it's pretty easy to get lost in what all is going on. And if you want like a super comprehensive look at all of the different issues, I would recommend watching Cloud9's the Nine Summoning Insight. They have a bunch of people who've done a bunch of research, talked to a bunch of people, etc. And it's like a 3-hour long podcast or something like that. And they will, in a very excited manner, say everything that they think is wrong. Here, I want to note the fact that this was leaked on a stream is unfortunate, but the problem is that it is the president and a player in the same room while this sort of business conversation is happening. The fact that it was leaked, while that is a problem, that's just kind of making us aware of the issue. It was an issue anyway, even if it hadn't been leaked, but now we know. And so it makes it a concrete fact that there is conflict of interest at play, because this has happened. And in the like right after the fact, in Lena's response, claims that she has done this multiple times, but that it has never been a problem before. But the issue there is that it's just kind of further reiterating that there has been an ongoing conflict of interest. I do want to define conflict of interest just for anyone who doesn't know. If you look it up, it's a situation in which a person is in a position to derive personal benefit from actions or decisions made in their official capacity. If you look at Doublelift in this situation, if he is overhearing conversations that Lena is having, he could be overhearing conversations that Lena had before he was on the team, about him joining the team, even about potential options that TSM has. Maybe he knew about them trying to shop around Dardoch before he was even on the team with Dardoch. Maybe that influenced his decision. Maybe he didn't want to play with TSM unless they had XYZ players, and then he already found out that they were doing that, and then he decided that maybe he wanted to play with them. We really don't know, but I do want to just make sure that in this conversation that we're having, it is clear that there is a conflict of interest.
I think that a lot of people think that the real mess up, like you said, was the leak on stream, and that's unfortunate, especially for Dardoch, right? But the idea is that, I mean, obviously, if Double's a member of TSM, I'm not going to say that he has no say in who goes on the roster, right? Star players, they're like, they have conversations with their coaches, those kind of things. But in that type of conversation specifically, people are asking, well, how's that a conflict of interest? I mean, how's that really affect him? It's like, there's no need for anyone to know. There's no reason for Doublelift or anybody else who should or shouldn't have been in that room to know Dardoch's market value. It's if he's being shopped off the team, there's zero reason for him to know that, zero grounds for him to know that. And that's kind of the main issue here, is that people are like, this is information that he maybe shouldn't have been privy to. So then what else? It's not that there's proof of something going on. It's that the plausible deniability of there not being a conflict of interest is now completely eliminated because this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate timing in terms of if you're looking at it from TSM's perspective, because the Doublelift trade just went through after the LCS investigation, and this casts a shadow on that, I think.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to focus on, is the next steps going forward. Obviously, TSM has they need to make some sort of statement. So far, they haven't really yet, beyond just the kind of the twit longers that Lena and President Reggie have put out. Beyond that, they're going to have to do some follow-up. But besides TSM, I'm curious if Riot should be getting involved. And I just want to kind of bounce some thoughts off of the two of you. Riot has been, it is their job to make sure that the league is run, it's stable, that the teams are stable, that, there's not any shady business going on. And, they are the ones that have to establish the rules and crack down if anything happens. We've seen this happen before, as recently as just, less than a year ago with the Echo Fox situation. That was like right before Summer Split when all of the stuff started coming out. So, and they made Echo Fox sell their spot. I don't think, this isn't the same. I'm not saying
no,
TSM needs to sell their spot. That is not at all, what I'm implying here. But, is this a high enough level that Riot should get involved? And what do you two think? Actually, I'll start with Chris, just because he hasn't talked in a little bit. I'll put you on the spot first, the hot seat.
All right, I do think Riot should intervene and investigate further.
Mm-hmm.
I know they've said in the past that they investigated whether this was a conflict of interest in signing Doublelift, but they weren't transparent with what facts they gathered. So I think if they were transparent with that with the community, and communicate that with the community, then we would be more accepting in what they found out. But since we don't know, I feel like they should, and if they need to investigate further, then they should do that and just touch base with what they found out with us.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something that I think there's something with Riot and like the community that they should just connect with their facts, and just like we should be able to know basically what they found out through what they talked about with TSM.
Yeah, transparency for sure that would be very helpful right now. I think it would set a lot of people's minds at ease. Nick, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm not trying to miss the entire point here, but me, it's just kind of like what happens to what happens to Dardoch now, and that's the thing is like Riot could get involved, like, and they can investigate all they want, all that stuff. Like the damage has kind of been done for Dardoch, I feel, because at the end of the day, like Dardoch has a checkered past with teams. He's been viewed as a controversial player, someone difficult to work with. It doesn't surprise me necessarily that it'd be hard to shop, but having that be kind of out there, like what's Riot going to do? Like force a team to sign him if TSM doesn't want him? Like, I think that there's like, sure, maybe we should argue that Riot should get involved. They've been more involved in these types of situations, like in the past with the Renegade stuff. But I guess it's kind of tough to see what can be done regarding that, and that's just kind of what's that's what's unfortunate about the whole thing leaking, right? I think that Riot, if nothing else, could be more transparent on exactly where the line is. This is not the first time that we've been vague, or not that we've been vague, excuse me, that the league has been vague on what qualifies as, what a conflict of interest, or like, oh no, that wasn't poaching, that was poaching. Like we've seen inconsistencies in the past, and even now, like if you look up like Riot's like poaching rules, like the way they stated them, like that came out on their website in like 2016. And the esports has, as a whole, in North America and the Western Hemisphere, has grown so much, and the LCS itself, like by literally tens of millions of dollars with franchising, right? So I think it might be time to revisit that, and I know this kind of leads into what you want to talk about, like see where, like, if we don't have a clear answer of like, well, what can Riot do, or what could, like, where does the Players Association come into this, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about the Players Association, so thank you for introing that. I've been in touch with the head of the Players Association, Hal. He is the former head of the NBA Players Association, so he has a lot of background, and I've asked him, about certain measures that he is taking and that the Players Association themselves are taking to ensure, and this was, mind you, before the leak happened, and I will hopefully be in touch with him again later, but he is aware of all of the stuff going on, and so I know, he's not just sitting back and doing nothing, and I imagine especially now he's got a lot more work to do, but I would like to see him and the Players Association say something about this situation. The problem for me, though, is Doublelift, Bjergsen, and Biofrost are all on the Players Association. And so if, let's say, Bjergsen and Biofrost didn't like playing with Dardoch last season, maybe they don't really care. Which, I don't want to insinuate that they don't, but maybe they don't. But Doublelift is
the point is that their personal experiences could maybe impact how they feel about the situation. We haven't played with Dardoch. We don't know what he's like. We've heard things, and frankly, like I think if individually, if they're like frustrated with them as a teammate, then that's within their emotional right. But this is when this is what conflict of interest is, right? Like it's not that they're going to actively screw him over, but like how do we have no idea of knowing how that can be properly handled because of those factors.
And furthermore, if they decide, okay, well, the Players Association needs to step in to help Dardoch out in some way, and who knows, there could be there's a myriad of different things that they could do, and obviously we don't know how his contract with TSM is written either. Likely there was some sort of breach somewhere, considering the leak and the effects that it's going to have. But Bjergsen's also a part owner of TSM. And so there's another conflict of interest there where if he ensures protection for Dardoch. Not only is he going against, his organization because he's been there for so long and this is his president, and now he's kind of having to speak against or counter, issues that his team and his organization have caused for the betterment of a player, which is a great thing. But it's also a former teammate. It's also, he's a president of that org, and if he, let's say he guarantees a bunch of money to Dardoch, it's taking away from, his overall shares and the money that he actually has from that. And so it's a very complicated issue. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know if it's replace Bjergsen immediately, replace Biofrost and double it, like just get anyone on TSM that can't be on the board, appoint new members, and then go from there. I don't know if that's even plausible, and I don't know if other players on other teams even care, because these guys were put in this position because they cared the most, and that's what everyone said. And so if other players don't care as much as them, maybe they wouldn't even do anything anyway. I don't know. It's a crazy situation. Any response to all of that? I know I just said a lot of things. I'm supposed to be hosting, but this is something I'm just going to talk and ramble about.
No, it's fine, man. You made some good points. I mean, like, it's because, like, forget about even the issue itself. It's weird that there's like like, I can't imagine Bjergsen having to speak out against his organization for, even if it's for a valid mistake they made or whatever. Especially, like you said, he's a part owner. Like, he's literal ownership of the team. It's not just that he, like, he has an ownership of the organization, and that's like, that really pulls him into really, really interesting directions. Now, these are a lot of things that we've never dealt with before. Bjergsen is, like, I believe, our first player owner in the LCS. That's a relatively new development in context of his whole career. And I think that we're seeing a lot of these things that maybe wouldn't have, like, been foreseen, whether it be that we need to limit how players can be owners during their playing career, or how that affects, like, their jurisdiction on the LCSPA. I will agree with you that something does need to happen with in regards to the LCSPA doing something. But again, it's going to be kind of hard for me to see that. Let's remove the magnifying lens from TSM for a second. Like, Dardoch has a past of, like, he has worn out his welcome with organizations. Like, what type of litigation ensures that he has, like, and that's another part of the thing too, right? Like, maybe even if all this happened, maybe he wouldn't have found somewhere to sign anyway. But what exactly do you think, like, either of you, Park, since you obviously know a lot about this issue, and Chris, because I feel bad for cutting you out for a second.
It's all good.
What do you think the Players Association can do to make things better for Dardoch? In TSM's Reginald's tweet longer, excuse me. He talks about how the team's talked to Dardoch. They're figuring out, like, his next steps. They've already had conversations about potentially, where he'd be in the future and if it wouldn't be with the TSM LCS team. So this is not like a new conversation for them. It's just that it's becoming new to us, and it's hard to imagine. I guess for me, I just keep like, man, like, where's Dardoch going to be in the summer? You know what I mean? Like, I really don't know, because I can't imagine he'll be playing in the LCS with TSM, but to then have him be on Academy or something, like, he wasn't the best jungler in the league, but he was definitely pretty good. I would say he was at least middle of the pack, and it was a big part in TSM being strong, I think, because of how well he set up Broken Blade, who was a massive carry for them. But that's not important. What's like, his role in the team is important, but what is important is that it doesn't really seem like we've run into a position where there isn't a clear path forward onto how this is deliberated, right? I guess I'm just wondering from you guys, like, what do you think the Players Association can do, knowing why it's set up, what it's supposed to do? What can they do for Dardoch to, like, make things, better, so to speak?
Yeah, Chris, do you have any response?
Yeah, I think there should be some sort of buyout from TSM. Like, let's say this: if TSM can't get rid of Dardoch to another team, they should just be able to pay him for the rest of his salary. Given that's in his contract, of course. Okay. But if not, and you have to leave it to the Players Association. Man, that's a tough situation, considering the TSM players are, like, officers of the PA. But it's hard to say, because then there's no one protecting Dardoch from, like, whatever's gonna happen either. in that case, then like I feel like the PA should be like restructured and revamped in a way to ensure like players are protected from this sort of things happening in the future. Because it's not like this is our first time experiencing something like this in esports as a whole.
Yeah.
So
and it's also like it brings up a problem with the Players Association in a vacuum. Like, forget this entire issue, forget the members of the board. Like, this has been talked about how can a player, if they have an issue with the league or an organization they're playing for, whatever, feel comfortable when the appeals court of sorts is established by the LCS, right? This is not a third party, like legal base of some kind or something representing Dardoch or anything like that, or any player. It's established within the LCS itself, right? And so like, in the past, we simply haven't come across like oh man, how's this going to go kind of issue. But that's what happens when you have someone who's supposed to be objective. Like, and yes, the evaluation premier will be objective, but it's so hard when everything is kind of in the same house. Everything is so close together that it's hard to really get an outside perspective. And I think that's what would be needed to remedy the situation in like an ideal fashion, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think the response that I have heard from multiple parties about the Players Association, because I've been actually having conversations with coaches, managers, players themselves. It doesn't seem like people take it as seriously as a lot of the journalists and other community members would like to hope. Going back at scouting grounds when players were getting talked to and they're not actually signed and they're unpoachable because they have no contracts. But then there's a draft and there are other things. There's so many like really weird issues that would, Riot needs to fix, but also they don't really have to necessarily. And so maybe the Players Association should fix them. But also if you're a pro, you're not really concerned about scouting grounds because you're already a pro. So they don't really need to fix them. So why would they? But then, this issue is affecting them. So you would think, well, we really need to do something about it. But in the past, they haven't seemed interested in unionizing, which would be very helpful.
Right.
They can't have salary caps or they can't work through their contracts. They can't have open contracts. Dardoch, who knows if he has an agent? I don't know.
I don't know.
It doesn't list it on Twitter. There are no known player agents saying, hey, I'm Dardoch's player agent. I don't like this. Like no one is being outspoken about it. And if he's representing himself, should there have been, if you get in trouble for something, then you have to be appointed a lawyer. Like, does he need to be appointed someone to help him handle this situation? Like, is it, I don't know. There is no precedent. And I think, hopefully this situation will lead to some change being made and some more structure for the Players Association and from Riot itself. But it's really hard and this time to really know what they can do.
I think it's going to have to change because yes, this is the first time this isolated situation has happened, but these are going to be the type of things that happen if esports is going to become if LCS specifically is going to become this massive thing that Riot is intending it to be over the course of decades and decades, right? Like this is, I want to see some clarity from them on like how things will be adjusted because this is just the first time it's happened. But to brush this off as like, oh, well, this is a weird anomaly. Like I don't think that's the right thing. Like you said, like there is no precedent, so this sets it now. And it is up to, I do think while it is a situation that is inherently, on a static level, it is a TSM, Dardoch, whatever situation. It's also a concern for Riot in the long term to make sure that they know how to handle situations. Like obviously preventing them, sure, but when these things do happen, there has to be a more clear means of how they're resolved. And I know it's only been like 48 hours since it happened, but we've heard nothing from the organization, right? If Dardoch has a representative, I'm sorry, from the organization, an official statement outside of Twitlongers from executive members. We haven't had any announcement on the team or from the team, like on TSM's website. If Dardoch has a representative, we haven't heard about him, and Riot hasn't said anything yet either. And I don't think like Chris said, if at least at the very least some transparency with the process of whether there'll be another investigation or transparency on the first investigation is going to need to happen, because as you can see, like we've been talking about this for 25 minutes, there really aren't like definitive clear answers yet, and that's problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should be able to figure this out in 25 minutes. Come on. No, I agree. I think, hopefully we'll see something happen from the situation.
And I'm sorry, one more thing, just because I just kind of like finish the Overwatch thing with like, hey, like think about the players, like Chris said. Again, like it is not anyone's fault, but Dardoch's if certain organizations don't want him because of past experiences, but that doesn't justify his market value inherently being lowered by being leaked. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that seems like, well, who cares? It's Dardoch anyway. He's been like a jerk, blah, blah, blah. It's like that's not the point. Like it needs to be clear. It needs to be clear cut for everyone. That's the whole point of setting a standard, setting a precedent, having these things set in stone, having them in writing. And I hope that whatever happens, it gets resolved not only for now, but also with a more clear means of action in the future. Because if this is going to get bigger, esports is growing, it's continuing to grow. That means there's going to be more knowledge around contracts, more knowledge, like more players have agents now than they ever have, right? Like, so it's just necessary for, I think I know it's, boring legal jargon or whatever, but that needs to grow with the rest of the scene around it. Mm-hmm. Or stuff like this will keep happening.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's clear. We need some solutions. So we'll see what happens. We are going to continue covering the story as it develops. I imagine next week I'm going to have to check back in because something is going to happen. And if nothing happens, I'm going to have to check back in because nothing has happened and it's been a week.
Something better happened by then.
So we will, we'll talk about this more then. It has been an hour, so we're going to close up pretty soon. Before we leave, any kind of thoughts for Dardoch and what his options are? Do either of you see any like, okay, well, assuming he's representing himself, this is what he can do. This is what he can hope for. Does he just go to Europe? Like, what are we looking at?
Ooh.
Spicy.
Nick, I'll start with you.
That would be spicy. I would love to see. I would personally love that. But I think that it's in the LCS there's we actually have a lot of people who are like relatively like solid in the jungle position in terms of either they're quite good or teams are relatively comfortable with their place in the system, right? They might not be looking to change things up just because they're junglers in the top 3, right? So it's all likelihood right now points toward TSM Academy, in my opinion. But that also, that means, are they promoting their prospect Spica early? Because he might not be. We saw him for like 3 or 4 games in LCS last summer. What does that, or does that mean that like they're moving him? It's that I think ideally, like in a perfect world, TSM has a different jungler and Dardoch gets to start in the LCS for somebody. But it's hard to see a world where that organization exists because because of he's played for CLG, Team Liquid twice, and Immortals already, and he like every single time like he didn't last like even a full year there, and we don't know all the different inner goings on and all of those different kinds of things. So I'm not saying that all that's Dardoch's fault, but teams will start to establish a common denominator like that. And let me tell you something, like more than ever now, franchise teams do not have the patience for ego, for any of those types of things. The reason why Cloud9 was so good, you talk to every single one of those players, there's not a bit of like ego about them personally. Like, I mean, I think it's telling that Cloud9 won the championship, but if you look at, there's this data piece and it was like total team Twitter followers and Cloud9 is like 9th place. Like all those guys are here to play, they're here to win. And yeah, obviously they want to build their brands and stuff, but teams are much less willing to take flyers on players who maybe had other problems with other organizations. And if TSM is trying to move Dardoch, that makes 4 in our 10 LCS organizations that are here. So I think that he is absolutely an LCS caliber starter in terms of his ability to play the game. But the team who started him last doesn't want to start him anymore, it seems. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who else will. Mm-hmm. And again, it also is, on his side, now that it's relatively known that somebody isn't interested in him, right, because of the leak, like that he loses leverage. Teams don't have to be worried about maybe another team wanting this guy potentially. So maybe if he does get an offer in the LCS, maybe it's a terrible deal. Like, we don't know. Like, we don't know the inner workings of the contract situation for him on his team now, or how these things. That's really the kind of the big issue at the league. Like, yeah, it was embarrassing or whatever, but like, it's that like it drastically affects the way that if TSM wants to move and he wants to move, and that's a mutual agreement, the chances of that happening are going to be much, much, much tougher to make that happen in a seamless fashion that actually satisfies every party involved.
Yeah, for sure. Chris, any thoughts before we head off?
I agree with Nick for the most part. I really don't see Dardoch going to another team. There's a lot of solid junglers in LCS, to be honest, and it's so hard for him to just move on to another team. But the LEC thing, that's something
that's spicy.
Yes, I would love to see that.
And I think
there's like,
you keep going.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, okay. I think there's a couple of teams like that could use his service, and it would be like a fresh new start for him, completely in the new region, new set of players that he hasn't played against with before. I think this would sort of rejuvenate his competitive juice, for instance.
Yeah, change the scenery. And junglers, like, I mean, just looking at the stats straight across, like, European junglers, like, the style in Europe is a little more aggressive than North America. Could be good for his style. I do like that idea you brought up, Parks. It's like you said, Chris, like, there's some teams that could there's more places where that could definitely benefit from that. And it would also be the first time in history that a North American player has been imported to Europe. So that would be very interesting. I would love to see Dardoch. I want to see Dardoch play more professional League of Legends, right? Like, I don't know the guy personally. I've interviewed him like once or twice. Like, but what I do know is when he plays the game, it is fun to watch, and I hope that wherever he ends up, he's happy and well compensated.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would be great to see him in Europe. Who knows if it's going to happen? Who knows if he even wants to move to Europe?
That's fair.
That's not up to me to say what he wants or what he should do. But I do hope that there's, some kind of saving grace from the situation, at least on his side. We'll see what TSM does, and we'll see what the LCS and what Riot Games does as far as the conflict of interest, and what needs to happen there. But I do really hope, same as the Overwatch players, I hope that there is some saving grace here for him. And we'll see what happens.
It's really easy to get lost in all the legal things and holding orgs accountable. And this is at the end of the day, these are like guys who are mostly younger than us, like playing their hearts out, like as a living, doing something they're very passionate about. And it's hard. It's hard to remember that that's a human behind the keyboard, And I'm not trying to get all sappy or cliche, but just like, I do really feel for the players in these situations, and I'm glad that we're talking about that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Thank you both for coming on. I know we talked for a really long time. As far as next week topics, I mentioned before, we're going to have to go over this stuff again. That's just how it's going to work. It's Esports Weekly. We're talking about the stuff that happened during the week. So expect some sort of follow-up on this, in next week's episode. But also stay involved, because it's might all change tomorrow, and then I have 5 days to sit back and wait. So don't wait forever. But we're also going to talk about some toxicity issues, and this is not related to Dardoch, by the way. This is entirely separate, but Boy has been talking about it. A lot of people have been speaking up about toxicity and League solo queue, toxicity in VALORANT, and the differences with voice and how that affects, having voice comms, how it affects the way that you play games online.
Sure.
And all of this was stuff I wanted to talk about last week, and then I wanted to talk about it this week, but there's so much going on that we haven't been able to, but we are going to get to that. And I have a guest who hopefully will work then, and we'll see if that works out. But we have some people that I think have a lot to say on the subject. So hopefully we can actually get to that but who knows? Maybe some other crazy stuff happens, and we'll just keep pushing it on.
It is esports after all.
It is esports. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Chris, for joining.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
If you have any comments on what you would like for us to cover as well, please add us on Twitter. You can find all of us on the screen here. It's also at Inven Global. Just let us know what you want to see, and we will catch you next time.